Hey, my name's Tim Haley. Today we're going to talk about how you got that deal on that $300 annual inspection. We're going to talk about labor rates, what's required for an annual inspection, parts, and who's responsible. This is an actual invoice for a $300 annual inspection. Parts are 100, labor's 200. So let's break that down. Honda dealer charges 122 per hour, Ford 124, Chevrolet dealer 140, BMW 145. Independent car repair shops, probably 75 bucks an hour. Diesel truck shops, 180, 150. Labor rates in comparison, 122 per hour at major 145 repair stations. Now, some of these are a couple of years old, so they might be even more than that. 125 per hour at a Hawker Service Center, 140 at a Cessna Citation Service Center. Independent shops could be anywhere from 75 to 100. The IA mechanic repair station average time to inspect. Cessna 172, about 15 hours. Beechcraft, 17 to 24. Piper, 10 to 60. Mooney, 16 to 31. Cirrus, 18 to 24. A Diamond, 18 to 17. Let's see what you can get accomplished for $200 in labor and $100 in parts. Based on the previous labor hourly rates and inspection times, our invoice showed $200 annual labor. If we charge $100 per hour, then we work for 2 hours to complete an annual inspection. Or if we use the average inspection time, say 20 hours, then the mechanic made $10 per hour. Currently, minimum wage is around 15 per hour. That tells you right there it's old, because I think it's 17 now. Regulations. Let's take a look at regulations. Part 4315, additional performance rules and inspections. Each person performing an inspection shall perform the inspection so as to meet all the applicable airworthiness requirements. Rotorcraft. Each person performing an inspection shall inspect the following: the drive shafts, the main rotor transmission, the main rotor and center section, the aux rotors. Annual 100-hour inspection. Each person performing an annual 100-hour inspection shall use a checklist while performing the inspection. This checklist must include the scope and detail of the items contained in Appendix D to this part. Each person approving a reciprocating engine power plant aircraft for return to service after an annual 100-hour inspection shall, before that approval, run the aircraft engine or engines. During a research of the NTSB database, we looked at 467 accidents, and I was surprised at how many guys didn't run the airplane after they worked on it. When you run it up, you need to be checking power outputs, the mags, the fuel and oil pressure, cylinder oil temps. Each person approving a turbine engine powered aircraft for return to service after inspection shall, before that approval, run the aircraft engines. Let's take a look at Part 43, Appendix D. There are 49 separate items listed under Appendix D. We don't have to cover them all, so let's look at a few. Each person performing an annual 100-hour inspection shall, before that inspection, remove or open all necessary inspection plates, access doors, fairings, and cowlings. He shall thoroughly clean the aircraft and the aircraft engine. He shall inspect fabric and skin, generally cleanliness, loose equipment, and might file the controls, seats and seat belts, windows, windshields, instruments, flights, engine controls, batteries, and systems. Shall inspect components of the engines, nacelle groups, engine sections, controls, studs, engine mounts, flexible vibration dampeners, lines, hoses, clamps, cylinder compressions for metal, foreign matter, screens, drain plugs, magnetic chip detector, list goes on. As you can see, there's a lot of items to cover in this 2 to 3 hours of working. So what happens when you take less time to inspect that annual? Things like this might happen. We have a cotter pin that's missing in a castellated nut here. The number one item that can be missed, skipped items on the checklist. So we've got a checklist that we're using, and now we're skipping items on that checklist. If you look at this fuel sump right here, the amount of corrosion from the water laying in the bottom of that fuel sump, there's no way you're going to convince me that this amount of corrosion happened in the last 12 months or in the last 100 hours, depending on your inspection program. Here's another thing, they skipped the filter. When's the last time this filter was inspected? You know, by the amount of deterioration, that air filter's been in service a long time. Another item could be improperly done, lack of time to double check items. The NTSB said that from the accident that this hose had been disconnected for quite some time. So during the inspection of this airplane, no one had properly inspected this unit to verify that the duct was still in place. Improper welds per 4313. Wrong part being installed. A spark plug helicoil was placed a few hours prior to this spark plug being blown out of the engine. It was discovered that the mechanic did not use the proper helicoil in accordance with the OEM manual. The manual called out for an oversized helicoil, but the mechanic used a sander size. Why was this? Was that the only part he had available? Did he not read the maintenance manual to find out what the correct part should have been? Aircraft was flown to a new maintenance shop due to retirement of the original IA. The new mechanic pointed out to the pilot what he had found and told them they needed a new cylinder. They went on to say that it'd been this way for years. The new mechanic also stated the price he charged for just the annual inspection of $1,500, and the pilot again got heated and said that he's never paid more than $300 for an annual. Here's typical problems you see when you're getting that kind of annual done. The owner complained for several years about a rodent smell in the aircraft. The owner, after 6 years of annual inspections with the same mechanic, took the airplane to another mechanic for an annual inspection. The shop removed a large box full of rodent nests in the wing. During the inspection, it was noted there was a large amount of corrosion in the wing, including a hole in the wing rib and corrosion of the wing skin and wing spar. Currently, the wing's been removed from the aircraft, shipped to a repair facility to determine the extent of the damage. This is all from that rodent making a nest inside that wing. Don't forget a closer inspection during your pre-flight this coming spring. Birds can find a new home within hours. If any repairs were needed during the annual inspection, did the mechanic follow the recommendation, the factory manuals? Improper torque on cylinder retaining hardware continues to be a major problem. This mechanic probably didn't have time to remove the baffling on the opposite side of the engine to properly torque the mount studs. Know that some studs are slid into the engine from one side to the other, meaning the stud can rotate if not installed properly. Also, placing RTV under the cylinder has caused improper torque since the RTV doesn't compress. After a few hours, the RTV works its way loose and leaves the cylinder loose. Eventually, the cylinder will depart the engine. See Continental service bulletins on approved sealants to verify this. If you remember our invoice, parts were zero. Let's see what they needed to purchase. I don't think they were zero. I think it was $100 in parts. All right, so typical filters, $28. Oil's $8 per quart times 8 quarts, $92 just to change the oil with no labor. Do you think they had time to inspect the oil filter? Do you think they opened up the oil filter and inspected it for metal? What about checking ADs? How much time do we have left to do this? If we only spent 2 hours doing this annual, how much time do we have left to inspect AD or research the ADs? For a maintenance shop to research a new set of logbooks, it's not uncommon to take more than 6 hours to research them. Account for applicants, verify the AD's been complied with, and verify the log entry for every AD note in the aircraft. Annual inspections that have been done cheaply usually have very poor records on AD compliance, and it takes more time to do research to verify compliance on every AD. The owner should receive a compliance sheet showing the status of all the ADs. AD, sometimes an AD gets signed off, then someone else installs a used part. Now that they've installed its used part, an AD's due again, and aircraft's unairworthy until it's accomplished again. Do you have a compliance sheet showing all the components and compliance with ADs? Previously complied with. Now, this item should have been checked on the post run up the aircraft or the inspection. Examination of the wreckage that occurred after the annual revealed that the airplane fuel selector handle was installed 180 degrees from its correct orientation. As such, when the handle portion of the selector was pointing at the desired tank, the pointer arrow was pointing in the opposite direction. Thus, when the pilot selected the left main fuel tank, the fuel selector was actually pointing to the right tank, which had little fuel at takeoff and was found empty at the accident site. Additionally, the fuel selector handle was missing its roll pin, which allowed it to be installed incorrectly. Because of the fuel system design of return fuel going to the left tank, the pilot primarily flew with the fuel select position to the left tank. The fuel selector handle was often removed and reinstalled during maintenance inspections to allow access to the floorboards in the cockpit. And airways directed for the fuel valve required repetitive inspections of the roll pin valve during annual inspections per the manufacturer's service instructions. Replacement of the roll pin valve with a D-handle type valve. Review of the maintenance record revealed that about 38 years prior to the accident, a logbook entry indicated that the AD was complied with by installing D-handle fuel valve. Now, once you install that D-handle fuel valve, the reoccurring inspection was no longer due. At some point in the last 38 years, somebody removed that new and improved style fuel selector valve that required the D-handle and reinstalled the roll pin type. Now, that's not illegal. The AD didn't say you couldn't reinstall that old type valve. It said that if the roll pin type and valve was installed, then you had to re-inspect it every inspection to make sure that there was no play in the roll pin and that the handle was installed and indexed correctly. So the mechanics looking at the logbooks realized that the AD had been terminated, but yet somebody put in the old valve and didn't indicate that the AD was now reoccurring again. The investigation could not determine when during the airplane's history that the fuel selector handle had been installed incorrectly and by whom. So the NTSB never could figure out how the old valve got back in. There was no record entry on that. Regulations again, let's take a look at Part 91. Part 91-403, the owner or operator of the aircraft is primarily responsible for maintaining that aircraft in an airworthy condition, including compliance with Part 39 of this chapter, 39 being the AD. Here's where the AD compliance comes from. 91-407, operation after maintenance, preventive maintenance, rebuild, and alteration. No person may operate any aircraft that has undergone maintenance, preventive maintenance, rebuild, and alteration unless it's been approved for return to service by a person authorized under 43.7. The maintenance record entry required by 43.9 or 43.11 as applicable of this chapter has been made. The IA is required to return the aircraft to service per Part 65 and 43, but the owner has primary responsibility to ensure that it's safe to fly. The owner has the primary responsibility. How can an owner be expected to know all this? The owner can ensure all of this is accomplished by selecting a good quality maintenance shop. Do the research, ask around if you're not sure about a shop. Call the FAA, ask about a shop in the area. So you remember the invoice from slide 4? Let's talk about where that came from. It all started with an air accident investigation from a Piper Cub. This aircraft invoice was found during the aircraft record review as part of the investigation of the accident. Annual inspection scenario. Day 1, aircraft purchased out of an estate sale. The transaction was completed at 3 p.m. Flown 150 miles to an airport to a mechanic for an annual inspection. So did they get a ferry permit to ferry it there? How long had the airplane been sitting? Day 2, annual completed at 11 a.m. Now remember, the sale was completed at 3 p.m. the day before. By 11 a.m. the next day, less than 24 hours since started, the annual inspection is done. Aircraft flown to owner's home base at 12:30 p.m. Accident report to the NTSB at 4 p.m. During the landing, the aircraft was destroyed when it flipped over. So in just a little over 24 hours, the airplane's already been bought and totaled. The aircraft was flown approximately 3 hours with stops in air traffic, ATC controlled airspace. Someone failed to safety wire the brake calipers. The NTSB reported that the brake caliper was bent and it appears to have happened when someone over torqued the brakes. The NTSB stated that the brakes locked because of improper maintenance. It was noted that only 2 of the wing inspection holes had been cut open. The mechanic stated he used the borescope to inspect the whole wing from these 2 locations. He could not produce the borescope or explain the procedure how to inspect the wing with a borescope. How many aircraft have you seen with inspection panels that's never been opened? There was a lot of items that appeared to have been overlooked. Altimeter static system, a 411, 413, had expired, and it was noted at pilot statement that aircraft flew through controlled airspace with the uncertified transponder. We looked at what a good quality mechanic shop should be charging. We looked at just a few of the parts cost. We looked at the list of items that had to be inspected. The question is, how safe do you feel flying with a $300 annual inspection? Flying's never been known to be cheap, so don't skimp on the annual inspection. Most insurance companies have clauses in their policy statement saying that aircraft must be maintained in accordance with the regulations of policies voided. You cannot afford to have the insurance company not pay after an accident. From slide 30, we see just to change the oil, there's roughly $100 in parts. That matches our invoice from slide 4. We see $200 labor at $100 per hour, which equals 2 hours, which is roughly what it takes to change the oil. In summary, the $300 annual was just an oil change. I want to thank you for attending. You're a vital part of this FAA safety community. If you got any kind of questions, don't hesitate to contact me. There's my email address, my phone number. Feel free to contact me anytime if you got any kind of questions or if you got comments about this presentation. I'd be more than glad to talk with you. Thank you for attending today. My name's Tim Haley. Thanks.